And welcome back to All Things Conflict with me, your host, Maria Arpa. And today I'm going to be introducing a really interesting guest on a completely new topic. But before I do that, I'd love to just say a word or two about my flagship dialogue roadmap training. 20 days of intensive training supported over the course of a year to give you the skills and mastery to mediate and facilitate conflict and dialogue in any community setting. If you're interested in mastering these skills, you can find me at mariaarpa.com. Thank you. And today's guest is Rachel Reed. Rachel has taken the dialogue roadmap training to assist her in her work as a death doula. So let's begin the conversation. Rachel, amazing that you made it up to Peterborough to the studio, and welcome to All Things Conflict.
It's a delight.
We've known each other quite a while now. You've been on the dialogue roadmap journey, and what an amazing facilitator you're turning out to be. But I wanted to talk really more about your original training as a death doula. So maybe you could just introduce yourself and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here. It's really a delight to have this conversation. So I like to say that my path has been absolutely organic. It's just been taking each step, really following the signs within myself and the signs out in the world. And listening to that. So nothing has been planned ahead of time. So as you mentioned, I'm a death doula. First, I'll explain what that is and then talk a little bit about my journey. So a doula, and there are doulas on the birth side and the death side, essentially is someone who non-medically and holistically supports people through these life transitions of birth and death. That on the death side, which is the side I know better, that could mean anything from sitting bedside and kind of non-religious, spiritual, emotional support. It could also mean practical affairs, helping families deal with the bureaucracy of an end of life, an illness, and a death. And it could also be creative, supporting people in creating legacy projects that they want to pass on to their loved ones. Designing funerals and memorial services. And kind of more philosophically and bigger picture, I see the role of a doula as really supporting people in finding agency again in these life transitions. Because for the last, especially the last 100 years in places like the US where I'm from and the UK where I am now, birth and death both have been medicalized and institutionalized and kind of left in the hands of the experts and professionals who have amazing roles to play, but we have forgotten that we have the innate knowledge and wisdom to take care of our loved ones in these transitions. So the role of a doula is really to remind people that and hold space for people to find that again and take care of one another. In my training, I heard that a lot of death doulas get asked this really tender question while sitting bedside by a loved one. Am I allowed to touch my loved one? And yes, of course, we actually know how to be tender with one another, but we've forgotten and we've even become scared of things like the human body. And then finally, what I'll say about the role of a doula is I see this work as very much connected to justice movements around the world, because I believe if we find our own agency, we can't help but want agency for all people everywhere. And so I see it as intricately linked to activism work and to kind of this conversation of, yes, death is natural, but a lot of the ways that people are dying right now and always are very unnatural and at the hands of oppression and violence. And so how do we have that conversation of what is a good death? Who has access to one? What is a death in which we can find our dignity and agency back? So that's kind of the role of a doula. And then I'll say from my own journey. So I experienced the death of my father when I was 18, very suddenly. And my family, for various reasons, was just not in a position to be able to, or to have the tools to speak about it. And then I, at 18, 19, my peers and I didn't have the language for it. I don't know if I even had the words like grief or a mourning period or anything. So I navigated the aftermath of my dad's death fairly emotionally isolated, and also geographically isolated from those who knew him in his life, because I moved across the US to start university. So this, of course, made me so attuned to how difficult it is to speak about death in predominant culture, again, in the US and in the UK. And so I realized I would, 6-7 years on after university, it was almost like I was holding this secret in. I would know someone, be friends with someone for a year and a half, and they still didn't know my dad had died. So I was actually hiding a part of my identity because I was, subconsciously believing that my stuff was too heavy for anyone to hold. And so I went on this journey of being able to speak about death, which then around the 10-year anniversary of my dad's death included taking the training to become a death doula. And then through that, realizing that creating space, holding space for other people to speak about death, dying, and grief was something I was passionate about. So I started hosting death dinners, which are facilitated gatherings with strangers, speaking about our personal relationship to mortality over a nourishing home-cooked meal. And through that, realized I'd love to do this with families. And so in a moment of serendipity, as often life is, I had been thinking, I'd love to take a conflict resolution training. And I just happened that week to be connected with a new friend who said, I'm starting a training in the new year and applications are closing this week. And that was the Dialogue Roadmap. And so I just had a conversation with you and took that leap. And now I'm building a practice at that intersection of dialogue, mediation, conflict facilitation, and end of life grief and bereavement training to support families and individuals in navigating conversations around end of life. And that is where I am here with you now.
So beautifully put. I was just busy just savouring every part of how you described things. And there were 3 or 4 things that I want to sort of pull out. And one was, the most natural things of birth and death have been medicalized and put in the hands of experts. That is such a beautiful way of putting it. And what that's done is it's taken our agency away from us. I know, with pregnancy, when women are, too strong a word maybe to say bullied, but maybe not too strong a word, bullied into having a baby between 9 till 5, on the C-section, and having that and told of all the horrors that might befall them if they don't do it that way. And it isn't about the C-section or not. It's about the fact that people are moved by fear.
Yeah.
That's the point I'm getting at, is that we've injected fear into these processes.
And urgency,
yeah. And then talking about how that weaves itself into justice.
Yeah.
Because if we take our agency back, and I would love to tell you about my experience of my father and my mother's death at some point, and the contrast. And then how that weaves into justice, but also when you take on the role of a death doula, the many kind of faces of it, from sitting by someone's bedside and just holding their hand and being there as a support and a channel, to actually perhaps even dealing with the family conflict, which I guess then brings in the whole conflict resolution skills and facilitating families, not only between each other, but with all the different agencies that you've got to navigate and all the different surprises along that journey. And so it all feels very connected. So where would you like to go in the conversation? What kind of lights you up? And then thinking about your own father's death, which you spoke about, which, I had a kind of identical, that could have been my story. My father died when I was 20. He was 34 years older than my mother. So there was a huge age difference. And then we were never allowed to speak of it. It wasn't that we weren't allowed. It wasn't a thing.
Yeah, it wasn't in the frame of reference. I mean, what comes up for me is just also sharing what I've witnessed in hosting, over 200 people at these death dinners, and that not only are we able to cultivate a space of deep listening and compassion, but it's there's a lot of laughter. There's a lot of lightness. There's a lot of joy. There's a lot of relief, really, in speaking about death, which is not something that people expect. And the question, of course, I mean, maybe not of course, but perhaps it's obvious that the question I get the most is, well, isn't that so heavy? Aren't you so exhausted by hearing everyone's stories of death and grief and loss? But I think there's so many reasons why it can be a relief. And I mean, as we know in any sort of dialogue, when you've been holding something inside of your story, you almost don't realize how much weight it's taking up in your body physically.
There's a quote that's something like, there's nothing more painful than a story left untold, or something. Yeah. No greater agony than a story left untold.
Yeah. But that is, as you said, not in people's frame of reference, that this is a story that should get told or that is worthy of being told. But I can feel the weight lifted around the table when someone shares something, even something very heavy, something very deep, often followed up with a phrase like, well, I didn't think I'd share this here with a group of strangers. I didn't come here to share this. So there's a lot of surprising yourself as well that happens. And it's also, there's a relief in acknowledging that there's not one emotion of grief. Actually, grief is a process, not an emotion. And a lot of people feel guilt around, I think I'm only supposed to feel the negative, quote unquote, negative emotions, sadness, anger, denial. And so there's guilt around feeling things like relief and wonder and joy, and even excitement for a new life ahead, right? And so sharing those kind of taboos and the things that you thought, oh, I must be weird for thinking this, for feeling this, sharing that out loud and seeing yourself, your experience mirrored in another person's story is such a relief. And then finally, I think laughter is just, sometimes we just have to laugh at the absurdity that is life and death. I mean, I wonder if you have a thought of the role of laughter in dialogue, actually. I'd be curious if anything emerges for you.
Oh, yeah, lots. I think there are two sides to that for me. And the first is laughter as a defense mechanism. Laughter can be a way to block the deeper emotions, so it can actually be a barrier. Because maybe it's just not time for those emotions. We have to reveal those deeper deeper senses of sadness and to go there, we need to be ready. We need to be sure that the space is safe, or, you know, that I'm not dealing with 101 other things, because people often fear they're going to collapse under the weight of it. So, you know, humour can be positive and negative. And then when I look big picture, I think that one of the things trait that I've always carried is an ability to stand out of whatever is going on and sort of go over there and watch life and just laugh at it. I mean, we have to be able to laugh at ourselves, laugh at, you use the word absurdity, and I like that word. Things are absurd. And in many ways, life is a joke. It's a joke that we sometimes take far too seriously. And that naturally takes me to this place about death, because it's, you know, it's that whole thing, two things are certain in life, death and taxes. So death is coming to all of us one way or another. And in another time and space, like, for example, in ancient Egyptian times, death was celebrated. I mean, you might know more about this than me, but I understand that when Tutankhamun died at 19 or however he was, it was a great celebration. Wow, he's lucky, he got off light. And we don't see that, you know, so it's just a transition. I remember hearing somebody say to me, which I really stuck with me and helped me to shift the thinking years and years ago, said, well, look, you trusted whatever energy or force it was to bring you into this world, just trust the same force to carry you out. Isn't that lovely?
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the, there's a few big lessons that we may or may not learn in our own short lifetime. But one is trust.
Yeah.
One is uncertainty, which is, I think, one of the biggest reasons why it's so hard to speak about death, because it's the great unknown. Yeah. But so was birth, and now we're here.
Yeah, now we're here.
There's a few of those lessons that.
And if we don't learn them, our life just becomes more painful. You know, we find ourselves in more inner suffering than we need to. So yeah, I think I wouldn't mind sharing my experience of my mother's death. I mean, for the last couple of years, I mean, she just daily said, I don't want to be here anymore. I want to die. She was elderly and she was in a lot of physical pain, which she could not find relief from. And when she died, and this was very directly because when my father died, we were poor and we couldn't afford a proper funeral. And I remember being in a funeral office and being presented with all these costs and sitting next to my mum and having to say, we haven't got any money for any of this.
Yeah.
And being completely sneered at. And that lived with me. And I'm not one to take those things easily. So I spent my whole life going, that's never happening to me again. So actually, when my mum died, which I'm in a different financial position now, but I said, do you know what? I'm not hiring a funeral director. I'm going to do this myself. And actually, the man in the mortuary was absolutely brilliant. And everyone was brilliant all along the way. But you don't need a funeral director. So I purchased the plot in a woodland and then had to buy the Eco-Coffin, which was funny because it came a week early and we had guests staying. So and the only place for it was in the guest room.
It's a good chance for them to ponder their own mortality.
And we hired an estate car and then we went to the mortuary and the mortician helped us to pick her body up and put it into the coffin. And I remember my brother brought loads of fresh herbs to put in the coffin, and then we drove her to the cemetery, and we had to hire the grave digger. And when I told the grave digger what, he said, well, I'll stay and help you lower the coffin in. And we just had a group of friends and family, and we just told stories about her life, and I played a Maltese folk song, and it was very beautiful.
So beautiful, so beautiful. And of course, yeah, it's an incredible example of remembering that you have agency and you can do it your way and you can slow down. And the herbs in the coffin even moves me, right? Those little touches and not letting it get swept out of your hands, which fair enough. We've in our society now, we're taught that the experts are the experts. But it's remembering that we are also the experts.
Absolutely.
They have their role and we can collaborate with them. But this wisdom, I mean, people talk about, you know, in terms of ritual, and sometimes I've heard that people really get called to rituals and you almost know what to do, or the earth is telling you, or something like this. You almost know what to do and you start going through motions that as if something bigger is telling you. It's like we have that deep in our body.
It's in the ancestry, isn't it? All of these things are coming down, you know, intergenerational lines. And that's very much stitched with when we began this conversation, and I heard you say something about, you know, none of it was planned. You've just you just felt what was needed in you and where you want to be. I'd love you to speak to that a little bit, because I think that again is very missing in the way that we navigate life now, with, you know, everything's process led. Have a process, do this, stand up, sit down, you know, be here, do that. And you also twice have mentioned taking our time. But I love this idea about what's coming through us and that we do know.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting because I have had a lot of hang up, which is interesting because actually my background is a independent documentary filmmaker. So I've always been independent of institutions and of the workplace and things like this. But I've had a lot of hang-ups around starting my own private facilitation practice and running a business. And I think what I realized is running up against individualism, not wanting to be an individualist. And I think a lot of the messaging around entrepreneurship and business ownership is individualistic, as well as capitalistic, but that's a whole other thing. And what helps me to take each step forward is realizing that this is far beyond me. This is a collaboration with everyone that I've ever hosted at a death dinner, every story I've heard, every conversation I've had, and also something bigger that the universe, or, you know, spirit, or whatever word that people like to use, the natural world, is some message that I'm hearing. And it's not about me, actually. And I think that's what is propelling me to take each step forward and be like, okay, I am the vessel, or the, you know,
instrument
for this, the instrument for this message. And that also, I mean, this is kind of a funny tangential example, but a couple years ago I was at an open mic, and I'm pretty terrified of public speaking. I'm getting better at it though, which is why we're here together. But and I thought, okay, but you know what? I'm going to go up and tell a story about death dinners and how they've been a part of my healing journey. And I made myself go up, even though I was so nervous. And I told a friend afterwards that I was nervous, but I just felt like I had to go up. And he said, that's because it's beyond you. And I think very practically, it's on two levels. Very practically, it's like, if my mission is to spread this ability of speaking about death and care and grief further, then, you know, then I should take every opportunity to do so. And that is beyond, you know, I accidentally say an embarrassing thing, or I'm insecure for 60 seconds or something like this. So that's the practical side. But then the philosophical side is, yeah, it is truly beyond me. Something is calling me, and I have to follow that call, essentially. And it's not even worth asking too many questions or analyzing it too much. I just have to step forward, which is easier some days than others. But yeah.
So the word that came up for me as you were speaking was service. It's something about being in service of.
Yeah. And I know, we had spoken in the dialogue roadmap training about how everyone has an innate need to contribute.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that sense of this being my contribution, this being my service, is pulling me outside of my own insecurities, even though I have many. Yeah.
So, probably not where I intended the conversation to go, but actually so interesting is, okay, so you've got your own insecurities, public speaking wouldn't be your first natural position, then something fills you and you do something that's beyond you, and we use this word contribution and of service. But I guess I think it would be really useful if you could speak to how, even if that's just, little steps you can take, or what you tell yourself, or how you open yourself up energetically to it. Like, how does one get from, I lead this very process-driven, transactional life, but I can hear something in what Rachel's saying, but maybe it's too good to be true, or, I can't see myself ever doing that, but I'd love to, and that. How do we learn to trust it, know it, trust it, be it? What could you put out there that could be from your own experience or just what you tell yourself?
I think part of the reason why I have kept stepping on this path is really because of the experience I had of my dad's sudden death, and this unconscious feeling that, as cliche as it is, life is short. And what are we here to do then? And seeing life as just a series of experiments. And
so not something to be won or lost.
Not something
or right
to be
or
won
wrong,
or lost.
but a series of experiments. And if you don't try it, you don't find out.
Exactly. And that wearing who you are on your sleeve, the effort to connect with the people who are also into the things that you are becomes effortless. And so I guess I came from a place of not being able to even tell people that I had a dead parent, to going on this journey of being able to start to talk about it, practice speaking about it with strangers first, then with people I knew, to this place where I'm constantly speaking about my personal experience with death and mortality in general. And now people see me as the person in their life who is able to speak about this, and the connections keep flowing my way. So I guess it's just starting the experiment of speaking what's true to you and seeing where it leads.
Or taking that which is taboo for you. So this could apply to anyone. Take something that's taboo for you.
Yeah.
And, put yourself on that. Get on that train.
Get on that train.
And
Get on that train without a destination.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it's all connected, because I think thinking about making death and grief and mortality center stage in my life and my work, of course makes me aware that, like I said before, this life is about rubbing up against uncertainty and things that are not fixable. And of course, we live in a society that wants fixable solutions to everything. And there is just no solution to being in the process of grief. There is no solution to a death or a bereavement. It just is. And so, of course, it's all wrapped up. And these are the topics that I've chosen to engage with, to interact with, to be in conversation with. And so perhaps that is also why I'm then able to keep stepping. I don't know. Does that resonate to other people's journeys? I hope.
I think when we bring it back to just, take whatever's taboo for you, because that was taboo for you, and death is taboo in our society, and begin to, because everything that's taboo is actually a pressure. You might not know it or feel it, but all the barriers and walls that we've put up around things are depleting us. They're depleting us, and those things need to be unleashed and given freedom and space to show up however they're going to show up.
Absolutely. And I guess, a tool that really I've learned in these last 2 years with the DRM training and with knowing you and the community of conflict resolution is just working on that internal conflict resolution. I mean, which is so helpful when we're speaking about the taboo, because still, as I said, I've hosted over 200 people in death dinners, but when I'm in a dinner and someone shares something really deep and heavy and intimate, of course, there's still a little part of myself, frankly, going, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. Are we going to be able to hold it? Are they going to be okay? Am I okay? Are we okay? And then the wiser, older, gentler part of myself, compassionate part of myself in the moment tells that part, yes, I believe we can hold it. And so it's really strengthening that wiser part of yourself to soothe the parts of ourselves that likely we'll never get rid of. And we don't need to, because we have the big sister telling that part, it's going to be okay. I believe we can hold this. I trust people. I trust us here in this circle.
And that, as you spoke about, dealing with the inner conflict first will help us not to push the conflict outwards. And as we see in so many families,
exactly,
the tragedy of conflict manifesting itself after the death of someone in the family, when a child dies suddenly and the parents' marriage will break down over time. We've seen many examples of that because we haven't been able to hold it in ourselves, let alone for each other.
Absolutely. And, so it's so often the case that from maybe an outside perspective, a family might rupture over something that seems like a small argument, but of course that is the top layer of so many years of interpersonal dynamics, relationship dynamics within the family, misunderstood grief, repressed grief, all of that. And so dialogue always. Yeah.
Well, that's another sort of area of contention. If we're talking about death, then there's, people's stuff and legacy and wills and all of those kinds of things. And that can end up creating a lot of shock, a lot of surprise, a lot of unexpected outcomes.
Absolutely. And so, it's so often that we don't speak about these topics until we're in crisis mode. And then, everything
then
falls
you're
apart.
trying to build a framework whilst under pressure, whilst
Absolutely.
being under-resourced.
Absolutely. And that's why it's my hope to have these conversations with groups and with families before crisis mode, but also while in crisis mode, or perhaps many years after, if a family wants to, process, reflect, or set new boundaries for the relationships. And so I feel that these conversations can really happen any time in the timeline.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess as I'm listening to you, the sense for me is, even if I take my family and, my own responses, and then I think about my age and then my own adult children, knowing you is kind of interesting. I've met you, I know you, that you're there in the background, and maybe it's good for people to know somebody who's a compassionate facilitator around the whole subject of death and what it does in families and how it moves through our communities.
Absolutely. And again, it's back to that internal conflict resolution. I mean, when I'm in a circle, I feel that my biggest role is to settle my own nervous system, to regulate my nervous system while speaking about these topics, because that energy travels from body to body.
Absolutely.
And that's all, when people come to me and ask, I have a loved one who is grieving someone, and I have no idea what to do, what to say. The main foundational thing is to be with them and regulate your own nervous system, because that is felt, like that sense of, I really want to be with you here. It almost doesn't matter what is said, because that energy is felt.
I mean, I always say that a lot of, when I used to run private practice, and a lot of the work that I did was that people felt safe in that they're sitting with someone who's just calm and has seen it all before, and is not going to get alarmed, and can hold that container.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the work in many ways is so simple, but often the most simple is the most profound. So
absolutely,
here we are.
So if you had a message, to give people about this and that whole journey, what would you want people to hear?
I mean, the first message that comes to mind is, you are not weird.
Yeah.
You're not. And I think I have this, there is, of course, something about each of our personal experiences that is inevitably lonely. Although we can be with each other and support one another, there will be things that we just can't possibly fully understand. The whole walk in another person's shoes is a lovely, but we can't fully, right? But I have this thought of, can we be lonely together? Can we all be lonely, but actually together in that loneliness and be with each other anyways, and hold both of those truths?
Yeah, because there's a difference between loneliness and isolation.
Yeah, I think that's the articulation. Yeah.
Isn't it? Yeah.
And, again, our society teaches us that we're supposed to be self-reliant. But I urge in this time to not feel that you need to be self-reliant, and to just share, something and see where it goes.
Amazing. Wow. This has been a very moving conversation. And I love your honesty and your willingness to talk about your own vulnerability in this work, along with your grace. Yeah, it's been really beautiful to sit with you.
Thank you. It's been nourishing for me as well.
Great. Yeah. Thank you.